Welcome back to another in our series of great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today comes from Paul's letter to the church at Corinth, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We'll begin reading in verse 1. Love. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of these is love. A man was asked how to spell Mississippi. He replied, the river or the state. That's a classic from the Spelling Bee Hall of Fame moments. I always get a kick when people in spelling bees are given a word and then they ask the moderator to use that word in a sentence. Well, that might explain why I never went very far in spelling bees. I should have asked them to use those hard words in a sentence. At least I could have bought a little time. However, there is wisdom in seeing a word used in a sentence as it pertains to its definition. Look at a dictionary sometime and you'll see. Many words are used in a sentence so its meaning is more clearly understood. For instance, the word nothing in my Thorndike Barnhart dictionary gives this meaning, a thing or a person of no importance or value, and then uses it in this sentence. He was so ashamed, he felt like nothing. So how does that help us in our chapter today? Well, let's take a look and see. But first, let me tell you about a method I use when I want to get the feel of what a word or a verse or a passage or a chapter is trying to say. I use the ABC method. A stands for what is above what I'm looking at. B stands for what is below it. And C is what is the context. Now, armed with these, let's see what Paul is trying to tell us. What is before this chapter that might help us? He finishes chapter 12 with this statement, verse 31, but I earnestly desire the higher gifts, and I will show you a still more excellent way. The context of this has been that Paul has spent considerable time expounding on things like their lack of propriety when taking of the Lord's Supper in chapter 11. That in chapter 12 he addresses their pride in possessing the certain gifts of the Holy Spirit and their superior attitude over those of perceived lesser or lack of gifts. He relates the church to that of the body that needs all the parts to function. In chapter 14, Paul continues with a practical aspect of the gifts as they pertain to building up the body. And sandwiched neatly in between these, and immediately after a statement in which he desires to show them a more excellent way, is our chapter. It is almost universally referred to as the love chapter. He begins not by wagging his finger at those in Corinth, but by personalizing them in his own life. In each of the references, first tongues of men, second prophetic powers, and then the sacrificial life, all of which, by the way, Paul excelled in. He admits that though he may have these, yet without love there is an emptiness within. He readily admits his superior abilities in these. In speaking in tongues, he tells us in chapter 14, verse 18, I thank God that I speak in tongues more than all of you. In his prophetic abilities, in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7, he says, so to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. On his suffering for Christ, the long list reads in 2 Corinthians 11, 23 through 30, are they servants of Christ? I am a better one. I am talking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A day and a night I was adrift at sea. On frequent journeys and dangers from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I'm not weak? Who is made full and I am not indignant? If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. Paul puts all these in perspective by showing their meaninglessness, that nature, if he lacks them in love. Now, Paul, could you define that Greek word for love you have been talking about, agape? And notice how Paul launches into the Greek and how many times it has been used in the New Testament and compares it to phileo and then the tenses. No, he doesn't do that. He bypasses all of that and uses it in a sentence. He illustrates it to show not only what it is, but what it isn't. Love is patient and kind. But love doesn't envy. Love doesn't boast. Love isn't arrogant. Love isn't rude. Love isn't irritable. Love isn't resentful. Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. Love never ends. Paul shows that love is more than words and definitions. Love manifests itself and makes itself known in one's own actions. James uses the same logic when relating to faith in James chapter 2, verses 17 and 18. So also faith by itself, it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. Paul finishes with the great statement of love's preeminence in chapter 13 and verse 13. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These 3. But the greatest of these is love. He doesn't downgrade faith or hope, but he elevates love above them. Just as he began the chapter by proclaiming the great works that were of no value without love, so it is here with faith and hope. If one claims to have great faith and an abiding hope, but does not possess love, what good are they? Now let's plug this chapter into our own lives and see if we're living in harmony with the biblical concept of love. It's a lot easier than you think. Just put your name in place of love in each of the traits. If it can be truly said, then that you understand what love is. For example, Matthew is patient. Matthew is kind. Matthew is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Matthew does not insist on his own way. Matthew is not irritable or resentful or rejoices at wrongdoing. Matthew rejoices in the truth. Matthew bears all things. Matthew believes all things. Matthew endures all things. Matthew's love never ends. Well, I see I've got a lot of work to do. And maybe the real test is let someone else plug your name in and see if they agree with those statements. How's that list of yours doing? Lord willing, let's meet again tomorrow and take another look at one of the great chapters of the Bible.